When my younger brother was 4, whenever he would get upset with us, he would pack a little tiny suitcase and walk down the street to a house on the corner in a huff. And he would sit in the tree in their front yard and declare that henceforth he was going to be living in this tree. He wasn't coming home. To be fair, it was a great tree. It was big and strong, and it sloped down in the middle as if to create a chair just right for sitting. Many of the kids in our neighborhood, including myself and my other siblings, would spend hours in that tree. Sometimes we were planning fantastical adventures, or sometimes we were escaping, or other times we were just watching the world go by. As an adult, I now wonder about the people who lived in the house with the tree on their property. As far as I remember, none of the neighborhood kids actually lived in that house, but the adults never shooed us away. I wonder sometimes if it's because they also knew that that tree was special. Maybe they understood how much joy it brought to us and that we needed it. I think many of us now would love to escape to the tree down the road when times are hard. How great would it be if you could just pack yourself a bag and just say, I'm going to go live in this tree when you're dealing with times that are stressful or difficult. Many people find that when times are tough, the best thing for them to do is go outside and listen to the birds, hear the trees rustling in the wind, maybe smell the fresh air and feel the sun on our faces. There is something singularly comforting about being in the natural world. But I often wonder if we recognize the importance of our connection with the natural world. Do we embrace the give and take of that relationship that we're in with nature, rather than view it as something that is just out there for our enjoyment? And do we sufficiently appreciate that the natural world does not center around us? That trees and other plants, as well as animals and other organisms, have their own lives that has nothing to do with us? Are we seeing the fullness of who they are? And can we greet them as a friend rather than an object or an it? In the last few years, I've started joking with my friends and started referring to my friends of the trees, which always feels like kind of a silly thing to say, but also stems from a recent recognition of the role that trees have had in my life. I was painfully shy as a child, and I often found it difficult to join in with other kids. So instead, I would retreat to my friends, the trees, and I would find solace in their strong steadiness. And I still do. Reverend Howard Thurman had a similar experience with an old oak tree in the backyard of his childhood home. He said, "Eventually I discovered that the oak tree and I had a unique relationship. I could sit my back against its trunk and feel the same peace that would come to me in my bed at night. I could reach down in the quiet places of my spirit, take out my bruises and my joys, unfold them, and talk about them. I could talk aloud to the oak tree and know that I was understood." He felt a kinship with that tree, an understanding that our experiences with the natural world are not always transactional or one way, but that there is a relationship present and working. But is that a relationship that we can sometimes take for granted? Botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer makes an argument that we have a tendency to other the natural world through the very language that we use to speak about it. She further asserts that the language of science, when referring to the natural world, sometimes leaves us lacking. She says science is a language of distance, which reduces a being to its working parts, the language of objects. Kimmerer recounts a story of trying to learn the language of her ancestors, the Potawatomi. She had particular difficulty with the language's tendency to have verbs for ideas and concepts in English that would undoubtedly be a noun. For example, in Potawatomi, to be a bay is a verb. She recounts that at first, she thought this concept was ridiculous, but then something just clicked. In Potawatomi, a bay is a noun only if the water is dead. But when speaking of the concept of to be a bay, she says the verb releases the water from bondage and lets it live. To be a hill, to be a sandy beach, to be a bay, all are possible as verbs in a world where everything is alive. She adds, this is the language I hear in the woods. This is the language that lets us speak of what wells up all around us. Kimmerer posits that this is the grammar of animacy. She gives the example of seeing her grandmother standing at the stove and saying, look, it is making soup. In English, we would never refer to a loved one or member of the family as it, because you would be robbing them of their selfhood or their kinship to you. Accordingly, in Potawatomi and many other indigenous languages, they use the same grammar to address the living world as they do their family, because, as Kimmerer says, it is our family. Kimmerer argues that in English, you're either human or a thing. She tells the story of a field biologist who has shifted her language in accordance with her relationships. This person will say, someone's already been this way this morning, when she's inspecting some moose tracks, or someone is in my hat when she's removing a deer fly from her hat. Someone, not something, Kimmerer stresses. She adds, the arrogance of English is its underlying assumption that the only way to be animate, to be worthy of respect and moral concern, is to be human. She recounts an interaction with a student who asks, doesn't this mean that speaking English, thinking in English, somehow gives us permission to disrespect nature, but by denying everyone else the right to be persons? Wouldn't things be different if nothing was an it? In her poem, Remember, Joy Harjo says, remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. What if we did that? What if we chose to speak about the natural world as being a part of us? Or as plants, animals, and trees as having their own histories, their own stories to tell, and their own lessons to teach us? What if we regarded them as being in kinship with us rather than something separate and removed? How might that change not only our beliefs surrounding conservation, but maybe how we view the world when we're just outside? Imagine walking in a forest made up of friends rather than inanimate objects that are only there to advantage you in some way. Jane Goodall has said she went to learn from the chimpanzees rather than about the chimpanzees. And that might sound like a small distinction, but I think it's an important one. Sometimes in our want to learn all about something, we forget to recognize that there is a give and take with the natural world. There is much we can learn from them if we take the time to slow down and listen and observe. My favorite characters from the Lord of the Rings books were the Ents, which are tree-like characters that over time become more and more like the trees they live amongst. They moved slowly, so much so that the characters interacting with them, Merry and Pippin, become frustrated with their slow, deliberative conversations. But they were taking the long view. They had been in this world much longer than Merry and Pippin, and they moved with slow deliberation. And that's how I often view trees. They've been here long before me, and they will hopefully be here long after me, so I clearly have a lot to learn from them. Mary Oliver says in her poem, When I Am Among the Trees, around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches, And they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. As spring is blooming around us and the weather is warming, I encourage you to take some time to find a tree and sit and see what they are calling out to you. I often think of the verse from Micah chapter 4, verse 4. Everyone shall sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. That's how I feel about the strong steadiness of trees. They encourage me to slow down and rest. Their presence is a reminder that though the wind may bluster, the rain may fall, and even tornadoes may happen, they will be there. The natural world is always there to welcome us as a friend, although sometimes from afar. But are we recognizing that kinship? Blessed be.